The mechanic's hands were shaking when he showed me the brake line. Someone had cut it clean through, he said, his voice barely a whisper. 1 more mile and you'd have been dead. I already knew who. What I didn't know was that his sister had been watching everything, and what she was about to do would destroy him in ways he never saw coming. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been taken for granted by someone who thought they were smarter than you, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on the notification bell, because what happens next proves that sometimes the quietest people hold the sharpest knives. Before we get into it, I would like you to grab a cup of coffee and stay with me as we ride together into this story. My name is Fiona, and for 15 years I believed I was living a good life. Not perfect, but good enough. I married young, 23, to a man named Simon who worked in finance and had the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. We had a small house in Coventry, a garden I loved, and a routine that felt safe. Every morning I'd make breakfast, pack his lunch, and send him off with a kiss. Every evening he'd come home, eat dinner, watch telly, and fall asleep on the sofa by 9. It wasn't passion. It hadn't been a passion in years. But it was comfortable, and I'd convinced myself that was enough. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in March. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Simon's phone buzzed on the dresser. He was in the shower, and normally I wouldn't look. I'm not that kind of wife. But the name on the screen made me pause. Bridget, Simon's sister. But the message preview showed only a string of emojis and the words, "She still doesn't know?" My chest tightened. I set down the towel I was holding and stared at that screen like it might explain itself. She still doesn't know what? I picked up the phone, my hand suddenly cold, and unlocked it. His passcode was for our anniversary and he'd never changed it. The messages loaded slowly, my heart pounding harder with each second. When they appeared, I had to read them twice to make sense of what I was seeing. Bridget, how much longer are you going to keep this up? Simon, as long as it takes. Trust me. Bridget, I still think you should just tell her. Simon, not now. Once the house is in my name, I'll handle it. The house. Our house. The one we bought together 7 years ago. The one I'd spent every weekend painting and planting flowers around. I scrolled up, my breath shallow, reading weeks of messages between Simon and his sister. Messages about money. About accounts and about timing. And then I found it. The message that made my blood go cold. Simon, she signed the refinance papers last month. Didn't even read them. Once it clears, her name's off everything. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. The shower was still running and steam crept under the bathroom door. My legs felt weak, so I sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at the wall, trying to process what I'd just read. He was stealing the house. Quietly, and his sister knew. When Simon came out of the bathroom 10 minutes later, towel around his waist, hair dripping, he smiled at me like nothing had happened. "You're right, love? You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my forehead. "Get some rest. I'll make dinner tonight." That night I didn't sleep. I lay beside him in the dark, listening to him snore softly, and tried to figure out what to do. Confront him? Call a solicitor? Relief. Every option felt impossible, like the walls were closing in and I couldn't find the door. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that I'd been so easy to fool. He hadn't even had to try. The next morning I went to the bank. I told them I needed copies of all documents related to our house. The woman behind the counter, a kind lady with gray hair and reading glasses, smiled and said she'd pull everything up. When she handed me the folder 20 minutes later, her smile had faded. "Mrs. Pemberton, I'm not supposed to say this, but you might want to speak to a solicitor." I opened the folder in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. But there it was, in black and white. The refinance papers I'd signed 2 months ago, thinking I was just updating our mortgage terms. Except buried in the fine print, in language I hadn't understood, was a clause removing me as co-owner. Simon had tricked me into signing away my own house. I sat in that car park for an hour, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. People walked past, going about their normal days while mine crumbled. When I finally drove home, my face was swollen and my throat was raw. Simon was in the kitchen making tea when I walked in. He glanced at me, frowned, and said, "You look awful. Coming down with something?" "Maybe," I whispered. That night I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How he'd taken over all our finances 6 months ago, saying he'd handle the boring stuff. How he'd insisted I quit my part-time job at the bookshop because we didn't need the money. How he'd slowly and quietly cut me off from everything that made me independent. I was trapped with no job, no money of my own, and soon no house. But the real horror came 2 weeks later. I was driving home from the supermarket, my car loaded with groceries, when I pressed the brake pedal at a red light. Nothing happened. I pressed harder, still nothing. My heart lurched into my throat as the car rolled forward, faster now, toward the intersection. I yanked the handbrake and swerved onto the shoulder, my tires screeching and my whole body shaking. Cars honked as they swerved around me. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face, unable to move. When the mechanic came to tow my car an hour later, he was a young man with tattoos and kind eyes. He crawled under the car with a torch, checking things, and when he came back out, his face was white. "Miss," he said quietly, "your brake line's been cut." "What?" "It's been cut. Clean through, and this wasn't an accident." My vision blurred. I felt myself swaying and he grabbed my arm to steady me. "You need to call the police." But I didn't. Because I already knew who had done it. And more than that, I knew why. Simon wanted me dead. That night, when I got home in a taxi, Simon was waiting in the kitchen. He looked concerned, worried even. "Fi, what happened?" "I got your text about the car." "Brake failure," I said, watching his face carefully. He frowned. "That's terrifying. Thank God you're okay." His voice was perfect and expression was perfect. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed him. But I did know better. I excused myself, went upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I needed help. I needed someone who would believe me. But who? Then I remembered. Bridget, Simon's sister. She'd been texting him about the house. She told him to just tell me. Maybe she didn't know about the brakes. Maybe she wasn't as involved as I thought. Or maybe she was the only person who could stop him. I didn't contact Bridget right away. First, I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof that Simon had tried to kill me. I went back to the mechanic the next day and asked him to keep my car. "Don't fix it yet," I said. "I need photographs of it." He didn't ask questions. Just nodded and handed me a memory card 2 days later with dozens of photos showing the clean cut through the brake line, the way it had been done deliberately. Then I hired a private investigator. A woman named Colleen who worked out of a tiny office above a chip shop. She was in her 50s, blunt and expensive. But she was good. "I need to know everything," I told her. "Bank accounts, phone records, everything." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly legal." "I don't care." 3 weeks later, she handed me a file so thick I could barely carry it. Inside were bank statements showing Simon had been funneling money into a secret account for 2 years. Phone records showing dozens of calls to someone named Amelia. And emails, God, the emails. Messages between Simon and this woman planning a life together once the wife situation is handled. I sat in Colleen's office and read every word, my hands numb, my heart a stone in my chest. "There's more," Colleen said quietly. She slid another document across the desk. "He's been talking to solicitors about declaring you mentally unfit." "What?" "If you're declared unfit, he gets power of attorney. Full control of everything in the house, your savings, your life." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "He's trying to erase me." "Looks like it." I left that office with the file tucked under my arm and a plan forming in my mind. A dark, dangerous plan that scared me even as it excited me. Because I realized something important. Simon thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought I was too stupid, too trusting, and too weak to fight back. He was wrong. I called Bridget that night. My voice was calm and steady, like I was just ringing to chat. "Hi Bridget, it's Fiona. I was wondering if you wanted to meet for coffee this week." There was a long pause. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes. There's something I need to talk to you about." "About Simon." Another pause. Then quietly, "All right. Thursday." "Thursday's perfect." We met at a small cafe in town, the kind with mismatched chairs and tea served in chipped mugs. Bridget arrived 10 minutes late, looking nervous. She sat across from me, her hands fidgeting with her phone. "What's this about?" she asked. I slid the file across the table. "Open it." She hesitated, then did. I watched her face as she flipped through the pages. The bank statements. The emails. The photos of the brake line. With each page, her expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Fiona," she whispered, I didn't know about this. About what? The affair? The house? Or the fact that he tried to murder me? Her hands were shaking now. He told me he was leaving you. That you'd agreed to it and it was mutual. Does this look mutual? I tapped the photo of the brake line. Tears filled her eyes. Oh my God. He's your brother, I said quietly. But he's also a monster. And I need your help. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. What do you want me to do? I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. I want you to help me destroy him. Bridget and I spent the next month planning. Not revenge exactly, but justice. There's a difference. She told me things I never would have discovered on my own. How Simon had always been like this, manipulative and cold even as a child. How their parents had covered for him when he stole from his first girlfriend. How Bridget had stayed loyal out of guilt, out of family obligation even when she knew he was wrong. I'm done protecting him, she said one night over wine in my kitchen. He needs to face what he's done. The plan was simple but devastating. Bridget would wear a wire. She'd meet Simon, tell him she was worried about me and get him talking. It worked better than we'd hoped. They met at a pub on a rainy Tuesday evening. Bridget's phone, hidden in her jacket pocket, recorded everything. She's getting suspicious, Bridget said, her voice shaking just enough to sound genuine. What if she finds out about the house? Simon laughed. He actually laughed. She won't find out. She's too thick to figure it out. And the car. Pause. Then quieter. That was just a scare. I didn't think the brakes would actually fail. But they did, Simon. She could have died. I know. His voice was cold and emotionless. But she didn't. And honestly, Bridget, it would have made things easier. Bridget sent me the recording that night. I listened to it 3 times, my blood turning to ice. He'd admitted everything. But I didn't go to the police. Instead, I did something Simon never expected. I invited his entire family to our house for Sunday lunch. His parents. His aunt and uncle. Bridget and even Amelia, though she didn't know who I was. Simon was confused but pleased. This is nice, Fi. I'm glad you're making an effort. I smiled and served roast chicken. Halfway through the meal, I stood up and tapped my wine glass. I'd like to say something. Simon looked at me surprised. Everyone else went quiet. I want to thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady. Because there's something you need to hear. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Simon's voice filled the room. She's too thick to figure it out. It would have made things easier. The color drained from his face. His mother gasped. His father stood up, knocking his chair backward. What is this? Simon stammered. It's you, I said calmly. Admitting you tried to kill me. Chaos erupted. His mother was crying and his father was shouting. Amelia, pale and shaking, grabbed her bag and left without a word. Bridget sat quietly, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't leave. She stayed. Simon lunged at me, but his father grabbed him. You need to leave, he said to his son, his voice breaking. Now. Simon looked around the room at the faces of everyone who'd once loved him, and saw nothing but disgust. He left without another word. The police came 3 days later and I gave them everything. The file, the recording and the mechanic's testimony. They arrested Simon at his office, led him out in handcuffs while his colleagues watched. He was charged with attempted murder. The case made local news. His firm fired him and Amelia blocked his number. His parents disowned him. And the house. It stayed mine. A judge reversed the refinance once they saw the evidence of fraud. I'm still in that house. I repainted the kitchen, planted new flowers and turned Simon's office into a reading room. Bridget comes over for tea sometimes. We don't talk about him much anymore. People ask me if I feel guilty or if I regret what I did. The answer is no. Not even a little. Because here's what I learned. Silence isn't strength. Letting someone destroy you quietly isn't noble. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is fight back. Simon thought I was weak, stupid and easy to erase. He was wrong. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you, leave a comment below. Share your story. And hit that subscribe button because in the next story, we're talking about the woman whose mother-in-law tried to steal her baby. You won't believe what she did next. Remember, you're stronger than anyone who tries to make you small. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.